Hello and welcome to the Sleep Science Podcast. I'm Penny Lewis, a neuroscientist specializing in sleep and memory and the presenter of this show. In the podcast, we talk about all things related to sleep, from dreaming and sleepwalking to what sleep does for our brain and body and how we can get more out of our sleep.
Hi everyone, welcome to our Christmas special. In this episode, we are going to do a question and answer session. You are going to be brought into one of our lab meetings at the NAPS lab here in Cardiff. You're going to meet the team, and each member of the team is going to answer a question that was sent in by a listener. So we have a whole list of interesting questions that were sent in. So we'll start by introducing everyone, hearing what they work on and where they come from.
Hi, I am Mo Abdellahi. I'm a postdoc researcher and I work on EEG analysis and machine and deep learning. And I have a particular interest in classifying memory reactivation in REM and non-REM sleep. And I am from Egypt.
Hi, I'm Kyrillos. I'm a psychiatrist. I'm also a first-year PhD student. I'm planning to work on targeted memory reactivation in depression and PTSD. And I'm also from Egypt.
I'm Megan Wadon, and I'm a final year PhD student in the NAPS lab from Wrexham in North Wales, and I work on closed loop targeted memory reactivation in slow wave sleep.
Hi, I'm Yan Wang and I'm from China. Now I'm a postdoc researcher in the NAPS lab. My research focuses on sleep and emotional memory consolidation, and I use TMR in REM sleep to reduce the negative memory effects.
Hi, I'm Isaac Williams from Swansea, Wales. I'm a third-year neuroscience student on placement here at the lab.
Hi, I'm Martha Nguyen, and I'm a first-year PhD student. I hope to work on targeted memory reactivation in REM sleep, and I'm from Vietnam.
Hi, I'm Marta, and similarly to Jan, I work on TMR in REM for emotional processing, and I'm from Poland.
Hi, I'm Sophie Smith. I'm a research assistant at the lab, and I work on the website, podcasts and events and help the team where I can, and I'm from the Brecon Beacons in Wales.
Now that you know who everyone is, we have a whole set of interesting questions that have been sent in to us by listeners, and each member of the lab is going to answer a different question. So the first question that we have is for Mo, and the question, Mo, is what is lucid dreaming?
When I was a little kid, I was always fascinated by supercars. I had a dream in which I was driving my favorite car. This dream repeated for 3 days in a row. I liked it so much that I said to myself, I really wish I could actually control the car. After the third time I had the dream, I kept reminding myself that next time I dream, I will remember that I am dreaming. I had the dream again, and this time I was aware that I was dreaming, and I was able to actually drive the car and control the car. I think this is really amazing. This experience of being aware that you are dreaming while being in the dream is called lucid dreaming. And sometimes you can control different elements of this dream. I didn't know that this was a method for inducing lucid dreaming back then. This technique is actually called mnemonic induction of lucid dreams, or MILD. This technique involves repeatedly telling yourself that next time that you are dreaming, I will remember that I am dreaming. And you can do this very simple practice before going to bed. Many researchers have tried to understand lucid dreaming, and some of them even practiced lucid dreaming on themselves. One example is Stephen LaBerge from Stanford University, who also published a book called Lucid Dreaming in 2009, where he discussed techniques and very interesting stuff about lucid dreaming. I like this approach when he mentioned that lucid dreaming could be used for meditation. And instead of going away from negative things, you actually try to handle them. He mentioned that we usually think about a nightmare as something that we have to avoid and would like to just immediately wake up from. But when lucid dreaming, given that you are aware that this is just a dream, you will come to realize that you can control and think about negativity in a different way, because this is just a nightmare, right? Nothing can actually harm you. By that, you can practice facing negative things instead of pushing them away. MILD is just one method for learning how to lucid dream. Another method that I like is it's a very simple reality check. So you can look at your hand or read text or something very simple like pushing your finger through your palm. These can help train your mind to question whether you are dreaming or awake. There are also some interesting features about this state that we can actually measure using EEG signals from the human brain. Because this state is gathering features that are like a combination of rapid eye movement sleep features and wakefulness features. So we can see high theta activity and we can see increased activity in the frontal areas of the brain. And we can also see high gamma activity around 40 hertz. And there is also enhanced coherence between frontal and temporal regions. So that's actually something that we can measure. Also, a published research by Voss et al. In Nature Neuroscience, they showed that it could be possible to induce lucid dreaming using low current stimulation. I think this is very interesting. I would also recommend, if you are interested in lucid dreaming, to check the work by Karen Conkley and their paper where they had this real-time dialogue between experimenters and dreamers. For me, this sounds like a science fiction, but it's true and it's super nice. I think it's a very interesting state and a nice area of research.
Thank you, Mo. So the next question is for Kyrillos, and it is, do dreams do anything for us?
Well, I think throughout history, humankind has been very interested in different questions about dreams. What do they mean? Why do they happen? Across cultures, dreams have been associated with different sorts of beliefs and symbolic interpretations. In the early 20th century, Sigmund Freud introduced the idea of unconscious, which is basically the mystery box of the brain, which we can now describe as all sorts of background processes happening in our brain that we're not aware that they're happening. We are aware of our senses, our thoughts to some extent, but not very aware of how they associate to each other at different levels. Freud thought that dreams were the gateway to the unconscious brain processes, which was a fascinating observation at that time, that dreams are like a symbolic replay of these unconscious background processes. Now we know that the brain is far from quiet during sleep. The earliest experimental evidence of memory replay during sleep comes from rodent literature. They recorded the pattern of neuronal cell firing in rodents while learning a certain task, then detected the same pattern being replayed during subsequent sleep, which was thought to help with task learning. As we know, novel information is stored in the hippocampus for short term. Then through the process of memory replay, some memories are transferred for long-term storage in the cerebral cortex in the form of memory ensembles or patterns of neuronal firing. In other words, the process of replay during sleep may be helpful with the consolidation of acquired memories or skills. Studies have shown that sleep helps with different types of learning, such as associative learning, visuospatial learning. In addition, sleep also is thought to have a role in emotional memories, uncoupling the emotional component from the contextual component, consolidating the contextual aspect while toning down the affective coloring of the emotional memory. Another theory is the activation synthesis model, which proposes that dreams are a result of the forebrain trying to find a meaning to these random activation patterns that occur during sleep. Also, the predictive coding model proposes another explanation for dreams. We could think of the brain as a prediction machine that constantly makes predictions about our world and assesses the accuracy of these predictions to refine them. So, for example, if you're working in an office, your brain is expecting certain sounds such as typing, chatting, or footsteps. These sounds happen frequently without your brain even paying attention to them. However, if all of a sudden a Christmas song plays in the office, this defies your brain's predictions and expectations about this environment, and it creates what we call a prediction error, which makes your brain instantly engaged. As with any good predictive model, our brain has to constantly keep modifying and refining it according to the input to improve its accuracy. Sleep offers a good opportunity for this refining process because during sleep, the input from our senses is shut off and the predictive algorithms can be replayed and refined for future use. To sum up, I think dreams are a very fascinating topic that we know very little about. Many theories have been developed to fill in this gap. However, there are still lots of things I think to uncover about why dreams happen or how they may be affecting us.
Okay, thanks, Kyrillos. These are quite tricky questions, aren't they? Okay, so the next question is for Yan. And the question is, What types of memory does sleep help to consolidate?
Okay, this is a very interesting question and is very correlated with our research. So sleep plays a powerful role in memory consolidation, helping to turn new information and experiences into stable long-term memories. Lots of research shows that different stages of sleep benefit different types of memory. So let's break down the main ones. First, I want to talk about declarative memory, which covers facts and basically anything we consciously remember, like a historical date or a personal experience. This type of memory gets a big boost from slow wave sleep, which is the deep restorative sleep usually happening in the first half of the night. So maybe you still remember Kyrillos' answer that our memory will transfer from hippocampus to the cortex. Yes, during this stage, our brain actively transfers these recent memories from the hippocampus to the cortex, where they become more stable. So next, we have procedural memory, which is the kind of memory we need for skills and habits. Think of learning a new instrument, typing, or swimming, riding bicycles. This type of memory benefits a lot from REM sleep, the sleep stage with rapid eye movement and vivid dreams, which is more prominent later in the night. So during REM, the brain strengthens the neural circuits used for these skills, helping us improve our performance over time. Finally, I would like to discuss emotional memories, those tied to feelings or significant life events, which are also the primary focus of my research. So REM sleep in particular plays a crucial role in the consolidation of emotional memories. Research findings suggest that REM sleep can help reduce the emotional intensity of negative memories, aiding emotional regulation. So in short, sleep stages work together, each strengthening different aspects of memory. If we are not getting enough quality sleep, especially deep and REM sleep, it's harder for our brain to lock in the information and skills we learn each day. So that's why a good night's sleep is so crucial, not just for our health, but for learning, problem solving, and emotional well-being.
Thank you very much, Yan. We'll move on to the next question, which is for Megan. And the question is, how does sleep change as you age, as you get older?
One of the most notable changes is in the amount of sleep that we need. So both sleep duration and sleep efficiency show a general downward trend across the lifespan. Babies and young children tend to need about 11 to 12 hours of sleep, whereas older children, this sort of starts to reduce to about 10 hours per night. Younger adults, this again reduces to about 8 hours, which is probably the figure that we're all more familiar with. And once you get sort of over 40 years of age, this decreases even further to maybe about 7 hours of sleep, although each individual will be different. But there are also differences in the sleep itself. So something that I think we're maybe all familiar with is that babies sleep both during the day and during the night. So at 1 month, babies sleep for about 6.5 hours during the day, which then decreases to about 1.5 hours by 18 months. And interestingly, initially, nighttime sleep increases over the first 7 months of life from about 7 hours to about 12 hours, but then it starts to decrease again following 7 months. Although external factors can play quite a big role in the amount of sleep a baby will get, at 4 months, just 1 hour exposure to electronic screen-based media decreases nocturnal sleep for about 13 minutes on average per night. But we also see differences in the sleep structure in babies. Newborn babies have 3 different types of sleep. So they have what we call active sleep, which later becomes REM sleep at about 2 months of age. They have quiet sleep, which develops into non-REM sleep. And they also have what we call intermediate sleep. And there's less definition between the sleep stages compared to when we get older. So rapid changes occur over the first 12 weeks and continue throughout childhood. And over the first year, the sleep stages become more defined, with the amount of active sleep, or REM sleep, and intermediate sleep decreasing, and quiet sleep, or non-REM sleep, increasing to about 50% of total sleep time by 1 year old. And by 6 months, the non-REM sleep stages that we're familiar with in adulthood should all have become apparent. Now, sort of like thinking about adults and how much of each sleep stage we get, compared to that 50% in children that are 1 year old, adults have about 75 or 80% of total sleep time as non-REM sleep. And if we divide this into the different stages, the first stage of non-REM sleep, N1, which is like a transitionary stage between wake and sleep, accounts for about 5% of our total sleep time, whereas N2, or non-REM sleep stage 2, which is the light sleep, accounts for about 45%, and in adults is by far the sleep stage which you get the most of. And then sleep stage N3 accounts for about 25%. So this is your deep sleep or slow wave sleep. And then REM accounts for the remaining 25%. And when we look at increased age, when we get to sort of like 60 and over, we see, as well as this shortened nocturnal sleep duration, an increased frequency of daytime naps, increased nocturnal awakenings and time spent awake. And we also see a decrease in this slow wave sleep, and although not as dramatically, also the duration of REM sleep, whilst this N1 and N2, so this translation period and this light sleep, increases. And it's not just the time that's spent in slow wave sleep that changes, but also the characteristics. So we see a decreased slow wave density and amplitude. So this is how big the slow waves that are occurring in slow wave sleep are. And this is thought to be due to increased cortical thinning and decreased grey matter volume in the frontal and prefrontal areas of the brain that occurs with ageing. So that's sort of like a very quick overview of just how different sleep is through different stages of the lifetime and how much it really does change with age.
Thank you very much, Megan. So staying on the topic of development, there's now a question from Martha. And the question is, why do adolescents sleep longer?
So yes, Megan has covered a lot of points, and the main point is that throughout our life, our needs for sleep would fluctuate and change a lot. But for my question specifically, I will focus on why do adolescents sleep longer. To answer your question, actually, adolescents don't sleep longer, but they require more sleep. And that is because they are going through a very critical development processes. And any of us who go through this life stage know that a key of adolescence is hormonal change. And that is why sleep is very important in this stage. So sleep during adolescence could help with emotional processing and memories processing. And the key stage of growth and development during teenage year also allows sleep to facilitate physical growth and brain development. Sleep could also help us with better focus, attention, and cognitive performance. Additionally, sufficient sleep also help us with better problem solving and creativity, and that is why it will help adolescents to have better performance at school. So the National Sleep Foundation actually recommend that if you're from 6 to 13 years old, the recommended sleep amount would be from 9 to 11 hours. If you're teenagers from 14 to 17 years old, this amount would be 8 to 10 hours. And if you're a young adult from 18 to 25, the recommended hours would be 7 to 9 hours. And the average of 9 hours sleep would provide you with peak mental health. And talking about mental health, that is one of the reasons why that teenagers really need good sleep, because during this period of life, you will experience many changes, hormonal change, and you can be more sensitive to many things as well. And adequate sleep would help you with emotional processing. That is why insufficient sleep could be associated with depression and anxiety. It also can increase emotional reactivity and impulsivity, which is usually heightened during your adolescence years. And poor quality of sleep could also directly affect brain functions in regions crucial for self-control, learning, emotional reactivity, and reward processing. Therefore, insufficient sleep is linked to lower academic achievement in teenagers. So, in short, to answer your question, why do adolescents sleep longer, or why do they require more sleep? In short, it is because our body and mind during these years actually require more sleep for us to function best.
Thank you, Martha. So hopefully we're all getting enough sleep for our age. We have just 2 more questions now. The next question is for Marta, and it's about the menstrual cycle. So how does the menstrual cycle affect our sleep, Marta?
Yes, they definitely can. However, not everyone will experience it to the same extent. There are a lot of individual differences related to age, lifestyle, and overall health. So before I talk about the ways in which different phases of our cycle can affect sleep, the menstrual cycle can be divided into 2 main phases, follicular and luteal. The follicular phase starts with the first day of menstruation and it ends with ovulation, and it is characterized by increased levels of estrogen, while the luteal phase starts with ovulation and ends with the first day of menstruation, and it is characterized by increased levels of progesterone. Now, both the luteal phase and the menstrual phase have been associated with an increase in sleep problems like insomnia. For example, higher levels of progesterone, which we experience in the luteal phase, have been linked to increased body temperature. This is important because our body temperature actually needs to drop in order for us to be able to fall asleep. So when that does not happen, we can struggle with both falling and staying asleep. This variation in sex hormones can also influence our circadian hormonal rhythms. So there are 2 important hormones that vary across our circadian rhythm, so throughout the day and night. And these are melatonin and cortisol. Melatonin is responsible for feeling sleepy, and it is sometimes used as a supplement to help people sleep. And although cortisol is often associated with stress, it also plays a role in us feeling awake, and we actually need an increase in cortisol for us to wake up in the morning and feel ready for the day. And these circadian cycles of melatonin and cortisol can actually be blunted in the luteal phase. So what this means is that the natural rise and fall in melatonin and cortisol levels are not as steep as they normally would be. So blunted melatonin response makes it more difficult to fall asleep, while the blunted cortisol response makes us more drowsy during the day. Interestingly, sleep in the luteal phase is also characterized by an increased amount of N2, which is one of the phases of sleep, as well as increased spindle frequency activity and a minor decrease in rapid eye movement sleep. Now, luteal phase is also when some experience premenstrual syndrome or premenstrual dissociation disorder, and both are associated with feeling depressed, irritable, upset, anxious, or otherwise emotional. And as I'm sure we all know, it is quite hard to fall asleep when we are feeling stressed or upset. And of course, it doesn't end there. Some can experience bloating, cramping, breast tenderness, and headaches during the luteal phase, which definitely don't make getting enough sleep any easier. This luteal phase is followed by the menstruation phase, which, as most people who menstruate are aware, can be accompanied by pain and discomfort related to cramps, which can also make sleep quite difficult. And while this doesn't necessarily relate to most people who menstruate, if you experience restless leg syndrome, the symptoms of it can worsen during the luteal and menstrual phases.
Thank you, Marta. Yeah, so it just shows how tricky it is for women with all these fluctuations. We haven't even touched on what happens with men's hormones and sleep. I guess that's a whole other question. Okay, but we don't have that question today. What we have next is a question for Sophie that is a completely different area of sleep. And the question is, how do the seasons affect your sleep?
Okay, thank you. It's a very fitting question, seeing as this is our Christmas special. And the seasons do play quite a big role in influencing our sleep. And this is because the seasons come with changes in natural light and with changes in temperature. And together these things change our sleep duration, what time we feel sleepy or like what time we want to go to bed. It can also affect our body temperature, and it also impacts the time spent in sleep stages that you've heard about today. The main driving factor that changes our sleep in seasons is light, and light affects our sleep cycle because we use light to entrain what we call our circadian rhythm, which is our body's natural clock. Light enters our eye and tells our bodies to be awake and lively and that it's daytime, and as the light dwindles towards sunset, we get less light entering our eyes and we get a release of a hormone called melatonin, and this essentially tells us that we're sleepy and it's time to go to bed. So what does this mean for the season? It means that in the summer, you're more likely to go to bed later than you do in the winter because you have a later sunset, and you're more likely to wake up earlier with the sunrise. During these months, temperature does play quite a large role. As you heard from Marta, we like to sleep in cool sort of rooms, and so temperature in the summer when it's really high can make it more difficult to fall asleep. As well as that, in some places you get high humidity, and this makes it really uncomfortable to fall asleep through sweating, or even interrupting our sleep, and that interrupts our sleep cycles, which are very important. Compared to the summer, winter is almost the opposite and easier, I think. The temperatures are cooler, which makes it easier to fall asleep, and we go to bed earlier and we wake up later because, well, it's mostly dark if you're in the UK, and so the sun sets earlier and the sun rises later. On average, people get about an hour more in the winter. You might not realise it because it might be 20 minutes before or half an hour later. We do get a lot more sleep in the winter. What is interesting though is during the winter we get more REM sleep compared to summer months, but it does make sense in that we know a little bit that REM is more heavily influenced by the circadian rhythm than deep sleep is, because we have other cycles at play that dictate when we feel sleepy and how long we spend in different stages. It's not just circadian rhythm. So to sort of round this off, some tips for dealing with the effects of the seasons, because I know how important it is to sort of get your sleep schedule and then all of a sudden winter comes along and disturbs it, is when you wake up, try and get 10 to 15 minutes of natural light, whether that's in the morning of the summer or the winter, when you're having a cup of coffee before you go to work, especially if you go to work in an office all day and you don't get any natural sunlight. This helps sort of kickstart your circadian rhythm and tells your body, okay, like now is the time we're waking up. Another recommendation that I've seen in some places is for winter especially, is don't try and stick to your sleep schedule so rigidly. If you feel tired, if perhaps you're used to going to bed at 11 p.m, but you're starting to feel sleepy at 10:30, just listen to your body. Don't go to bed if you're not tired. Don't be afraid to break your sleep schedule with the seasons. Try and go with it.
Okay, amazing. Thank you, Sophie. And thank you, everyone, for all of these interesting answers. I think it's a lot of fun to get a random collection of questions like this and try and answer them. And hopefully you listeners have enjoyed hearing this kind of snapshot of facts about sleep, and also hearing who's in our lab and getting a feeling for what we're doing at NAPS Group in Cardiff. So thank you for listening, and hope that you will listen to our next episode, which is going to be coming up in January, and it's going to be about parasomnias. Thank you. Goodbye.
You've been listening to the Sleep Science Podcast with me, Penny Lewis, and our producer was Sophie Smith. If you've enjoyed this show, please consider subscribing to the podcast or liking us on Twitter. Thanks for listening today, and until next time, sleep well.